They say ghosts don't bleed, but the quiet maid scrubbing the stones of Black Pine Manor bled every day from wounds no one could see. For 3 years she lived in the shadow of the king who ruled her world. He never looked at her, not once, until the night he followed her into the forbidden woods and everything changed. The fortress rose from the Montana wilderness like a monument to ancient power. Black Pine Manor sat on the highest peak of the Rockies, its granite walls dark as storm clouds, its towers cutting into the sky like jagged teeth. Below, the pine forest stretched for 100 miles in every direction, deep and forbidding, holding secrets that predators feared to disturb. Inside those walls, the air was thick with dominance. This was the seat of the Sterling Territory, home to the most powerful pack in the western regions. Here strength was currency, here weakness was death. And here in the shadow of all that power, Sarah Thorne scrubbed floors. Her knees ached against the cold marble. The water in her bucket had long since turned gray filthy with the grime of 1,000 boots that had tramped through the grand hall. Her hands were raw, fingers cracked and bleeding at the knuckles. But she didn't stop. She never stopped. Stopping meant being noticed. Being noticed meant questions. Questions meant death. She kept her head down, her honey-colored hair falling like a curtain around her face. It hid what she needed to hide. The exhaustion, the fear, the violet flecks in her gray eyes that sometimes caught the light, wrong glowing with something that shouldn't exist in a human servant. Scrub, rinse, repeat. The rhythm was meditation, the rhythm was survival. Around her, the manor pulsed with wolf energy. She could feel them, even when she couldn't see them. The guards pacing the corridors with military precision, the servants scurrying to complete tasks before punishment fell. And above it all, like thunder before a storm, the presence of him, Alphaking Garrick Hale. Sarah had never spoken to him. In 3 years of servitude, she had never looked directly at his face. She kept herself small, invisible, a ghost among the living. That was the only reason she was still breathing. But she knew him. Oh, she knew him. She knew the sound of his boots on stone, heavy and purposeful, each step a declaration of authority. She knew the scent that preceded him. Dark earth after rain, ozone before lightning. Something wild and untamed that made her wolf stir restlessly beneath her skin. She knew his voice, that deep rumble that could make grown warriors drop to their knees in submission. She knew he was lonely. She had watched him for 3 years from the corners, from the shadows, learning him the way prey learns the patterns of a predator. She saw the way he stood on the eastern balcony every dawn, looking out over his territory with shoulders that carried the weight of thousands. She saw the way his jaw tightened when his advisors pushed him to choose a mate, to secure the bloodline, to think of the pack's future. She saw the emptiness in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. His wife had died 8 years ago. An ambush at the northern border. They said he held her as she bled out, that he howled so loud the sound shattered windows 3 miles away. They said part of him died with her, that his wolf Fenrir, the legendary black beast, went silent in grief and never fully woke again. Sarah understood grief. She carried her own, a weight so heavy it had stolen her voice. The massacre played in her mind during the quiet moments. 3 years ago, fleeing through winter woods, her grandmother's hand gripping hers so tight it left bruises. The smell of smoke and blood. The screams that cut off too suddenly. Her grandmother pushing her toward the ravine toward the border, whispering the last words Sarah would ever hear her speak. Run, little light, hide your glow. They'll hunt you forever if they know what you are. Then the silver blade through her grandmother's chest, the light going out of those wise ancient eyes. Sarah had run. 16 years old, half dead from cold and terror, she had stumbled across the Sterling Territory border and collapsed in the snow. She woke in the servant quarters, bandaged by a woman with kind eyes and a knowing look. Mrs. Whitmore, the head housekeeper, had taken one look at Sarah, truly looked past the grime and blood, and seen something that made her go very still. Then she had done something inexplicable. She had protected her. "You will work in the kitchens," Mrs. Whitmore had said, her voice low and urgent. "You will keep your head down. You will speak to no one. Do you understand?" Sarah had nodded, mute with shock and grief. "Your silence will save your life," Mrs. Whitmore had continued. "They cannot interrogate what does not speak." For 3 years, Sarah had followed that advice. She became invisible. The other servants called her the Ghost Girl, Omega Zero, the Broken One. They whispered that she was simple-minded, possibly brain damaged from whatever trauma had brought her here. Let them think it. Better they believe her weak than suspect the truth. Every morning before dawn, Sarah performed her secret ritual. In the privacy of the tiny room she shared with two other maids, Sarah and Marie, who largely ignored her, she brewed tea from herbs she gathered during her rare moments outside the walls. Wolfsbane, witch hazel, silver root. Ground together, steeped in boiling water, the mixture tasted like poison and burned going down. But it kept her wolf sedated. It kept her scent suppressed. It kept her alive. The transformation urge that plagued every shifter once a month became manageable. Painful, but manageable. She could force her wolf to stay dormant, to remain hidden beneath layers of humanity and chemical suppression. Except on the blood moon. Tonight was a blood moon. Sarah felt it in her bones, a mounting pressure that made her teeth ache and her skin feel too tight. The tea wasn't working anymore. 3 years of constant use had built tolerance in her system. She had increased the dosage over the months, double portions, then triple, but even that was losing effectiveness. She could feel her wolf pacing inside her mind, restless and desperate, clawing at the cage Sarah had built around her. Tonight she would have to run. Tonight she would have to let the wolf free, or the magic building inside her would tear her apart from the inside out. The thought filled her with terror. The grand hall fell silent. Sarah's hands froze mid-scrub, her heart suddenly hammering against her ribs. She knew that silence. It meant he was coming. The massive oak doors at the far end of the hall swung open. Alphaking Garrick Hale strode in, flanked by his Beta and Gamma. Declan Reed and Cole Harper, his most trusted warriors, men who had fought beside him in the old wars and earned their positions through blood and loyalty. Sarah pressed herself flat against the floor, making herself as small as possible. Around her, the other servants did the same, bowing their heads in submission. To look directly at the Alpha King without permission was an insult that could cost you your life. But Sarah couldn't help herself. From beneath the curtain of her hair, she stole a glance. Garrick Hale was a mountain of a man, 6'5" of solid muscle shoulders, broad enough to block doorways, hands that could crush stone. His hair was dark as midnight, shot through with silver at the temples. His face was all hard angles, sharp jaw, prominent cheekbones, a nose that had been broken and healed crooked. But it was his eyes that arrested her. Ice blue, sharp, cold enough to freeze blood. They missed nothing. He wore black tactical clothing, cargo pants, combat boots, a fitted shirt that did nothing to hide the predatory power of his frame. This was not a king who sat on a throne giving orders. This was a warrior who led from the front lines. The council is pushing for a mating ceremony. Declan's voice was low but urgent, his Irish accent softening the hard words. They say you've been unmated for 8 years. The Northern Pack see it as weakness. Let them see weakness. Garrick's voice rolled through the hall like distant thunder, each word measured and deadly. When they attack, I'll hang their pelts on these walls. I don't need a mate to distract me. I need loyalty. Lady Vivian Ashcroft is waiting in the drawing room, Cole added with barely concealed amusement, his tactical mind already 3 steps ahead. She's been there for 3 hours. Garrick's lip curled in disgust. Tell her I'm patrolling the perimeter. I have no patience for perfume and politics. He turned sharply, military boots echoing on the stone floor. As he passed the line of prostrate servants, he paused. Sarah held her breath until her lungs screamed. She could feel him above her, a towering presence that made every instinct shriek danger. She pressed her forehead harder against the cold marble, willing herself to disappear. Garrick stood perfectly still. He tilted his head, inhaling deeply. His nostrils flared. What is that? He murmured, more to himself than his men. What is what Alpha? Declan asked, confused. That scent. Garrick's voice had gone quiet, dangerous. Wild lavender and ozone, like lightning before a storm. Sarah's heart stopped. The suppressants. They were failing. He could smell her. Garrick scanned the hall, his predator's gaze sweeping over the servants. For a fraction of a second, his eyes passed over Sarah's trembling form. She was covered in grime, smelling of lye soap and dirty water. Just another invisible servant. Just another piece of furniture. He shook his head, dismissing it. Nothing, just the cleaning chemicals. Let's go. The doors slammed behind him. Sarah released a shaky breath, her entire body trembling. That was too close. Far too close. She looked at the grandfather clock in the corner. 11:45. In 15 minutes, the blood moon would reach its apex. She had to get out. Now. The kitchen was chaos as the evening staff prepared for the next day's breakfast service. Sarah slipped through the back corridor, moving with practiced silence. She had mapped every servant passage in this fortress over 3 years, memorized every guard rotation, noted every blind spot. Declan's patrol team covered the east wall, 18-minute rotations. She had exactly 3 minutes between sweeps to cross the open courtyard and reach the tree line. She wore a stolen cloak, dark and oversized, swallowing her small frame. Beneath it, she had changed into the simplest dress she owned, something she could tear off quickly when the shift came. Through the scullery, past the storage rooms where preserved meats hung from hooks, out the servants' exit into the cold Montana night. The air hit her like a physical blow. Clean and sharp, carrying the scent of pine and snow and wild spaces. Her wolf surged inside her, desperate for freedom. Not yet. Not yet. Sarah moved quickly across the courtyard, staying in the shadows cast by the decorative hedges that the previous Luna had planted. Running would trigger the guard's predator instincts. She walked with purpose, just another servant, on an errand, head down, steps measured. 10 feet from the tree line. 5 feet. Almost there. Clear. The shout came from the east wall. The patrol had passed. Sarah bolted into the forest. The trees swallowed her immediately. Black pine forest was ancient and dense, the kind of wilderness that humans feared and wolves revered. These woods were forbidden to everyone except the Alphaking and his elite guard. Legend said they were haunted by the spirits of old wolves. That strange magic lingered in the roots and stones. Sarah knew better. The forest wasn't haunted, it was waiting. As soon as her boots hit the mossy earth, something changed. The wind seemed to whisper her name, carrying it through the branches like a secret. The trees leaned toward her branches, pulling back to clear her path as if welcoming royalty. This forest recognized what she was, what her bloodline had been before the purge. Moonborn, she ran deeper, her feet finding purchase on terrain that should have been treacherous in the dark. But she could see perfectly. Her wolf was so close to the surface now that her vision had shifted, everything rendered in shades of silver and blue, each detail sharp and clear. 2 miles in, she reached the place. Moonglade. It was a perfect circle of ancient birch trees, their white bark glowing like bones in the darkness. The branches overhead interlocked to form a natural cathedral, and through the gaps the blood moon hung heavy and red, so close it felt like she could reach up and touch its burning surface. Sarah threw off the cloak. Her hands shook as she pulled the simple dress over her head, standing in the sacred space, wearing nothing but moonlight and desperation. "Okay," she whispered to the moon, her voice rusty from disuse, the words barely more than breath. "I'm here." She closed her eyes and let the barrier in her mind drop. Pain tore through her, exquisite, searing. Her bones snapped and reformed, the sounds like green wood breaking in fire. Her spine arched, vertebrae popping and reshaping into something new. Her jaw elongated, teeth sharpening to weapons. Fur erupted across her skin in a wave of silver white, each follicle burning as it pushed through flesh. Other wolves screamed during the shift, their howls of agony echoing for miles. Sarah had learned to suffer in silence. She bit down on her tongue until blood filled her mouth, every muscle locked rigid as her body betrayed its human shape and became something else. Something ancient, something powerful, something the world had tried to exterminate 25 years ago. Where the girl had stood, a wolf now remained. She was smaller than an alpha wolf, but magnificent nonetheless. Her coat was pure silver white, each hair catching the moonlight and throwing it back like fresh snow under sun. Her eyes, those eyes that she had hidden so carefully in her human form, now blazed with electric violet fire, glowing like amethyst lit from within. And the magic, oh, the magic. It poured off her in visible waves, cascading across the forest floor like liquid starlight. Where her paws touched the earth, flowers bloomed instantly, white roses and silver moonflowers, their petals unfurling in defiance of the season and temperature. Dead grass turned vibrant green, spreading in circles from each step. Withered bushes sprouted new growth, leaves bursting forth. Fireflies emerged from the darkness, hundreds of them swirling around her in a living constellation that pulsed with her heartbeat. Sarah threw her head back and howled. It was not a howl of dominance or challenge. It was a song mournful and beautiful, layered with harmonics that no normal wolf could produce. It was the sound of all the grief she could never voice, all the loneliness she had endured in 3 years of silence, all the desperate freedom she felt in this single moment of truth. The forest sang back. The trees swayed in rhythm, their branches moving without wind. The earth itself seemed to pulse with her heartbeat, responding to the ancient magic in her blood. She danced in the moonlight, chasing the fireflies like a pup who had never known fear, feeling truly alive for the first time in 3 years. She was so lost in the euphoria of release that she didn't hear the twig snap 50 yards away. Garrick Hale stood in his study, staring at a glass of whiskey he had no intention of drinking. Sleep eluded him most nights, his mind too tactical to ever fully rest. Tonight was worse than usual. The council's pressure was mounting. 8 years without a mate, 8 years without an heir. They didn't understand. They couldn't. The mate bond wasn't something you could force or fake. It was a gift from the moon goddess herself, a recognition of two souls meant to be joined. He had felt it once, with Elena. The bond had snapped into place the moment they met, an unbreakable tether between their souls, pulling them together with undeniable force. And when she died, when that tether was severed by silver and violence, it had nearly destroyed him. Fenrir, his wolf, had retreated into the deepest part of his mind and gone silent. For 8 years, Garrick had ruled alone, his wolf a ghost inside him, barely stirring even during the full moon. Until tonight. Tonight, Fenrir was awake, restless, pacing inside Garrick's mind with an urgency he hadn't felt in nearly a decade, claws scraping against the barriers of consciousness. And there was the pull. It started as a faint tug in the center of his chest, like a fishing line snagged on something deep underwater. Then it grew stronger, insistent, demanding, a physical sensation that made his sternum ache. "Go!" Fenrir snarled in his mind, the wolf's voice rough with disuse but commanding. "Find. Ours." "There is no ours," Garrick said aloud to the empty room, his voice hard. "The goddess took that from us." "Go!" The command hit him like a physical blow. Fenrir was not asking. The wolf slammed against the barriers of Garrick's control, fighting for dominance, with a ferocity he hadn't shown since Elena's death, since the night Garrick had almost let the wolf take over completely and never come back. Garrick set down the whiskey glass with deliberate care. His hands were shaking. In 42 years of life, through wars and challenges and the death of his mate, he had never lost control of his wolf. Until now. He didn't bother with the door. He went through the window, shifting mid-leap into the massive black wolf that had earned him the title of Alphaking. Fenrir was enormous, twice the size of a normal timber wolf, with fur like living shadow and eyes of burning gold. He hit the ground, running, powerful muscles bunching and releasing with predatory grace, eating up the distance between the manor and the forbidden forest in ground-devouring strides. The pull led him deeper into Black Pine Forest, into territory he had marked as his own, where no other wolf dared to tread without permission. He moved with absolute silence, every sense dialed to maximum. Whatever was calling to him, whatever had woken his dormant wolf, he would find it. He followed the pull to Moonglade. The sacred circle was exactly as he remembered, white birches forming a natural temple, moonlight filtering through the interlocked branches. But now there was something else. Magic. He could see it hanging in the air like silver mist, could feel it humming through the earth beneath his paws, could taste it on his tongue like electricity. Garrick shifted back to human form, not bothering with clothes. Nudity was natural to shifters, meaningless. He moved on silent feet to the fallen redwood that bordered the glade's edge, taking cover behind its massive trunk. And then he saw her. A silver-white wolf danced in the moonlight, her coat so bright it hurt to look at, directly like staring into reflected sun on snow. She was beautiful in a way that defied nature, moving with fluid grace that seemed almost like flight, her paws barely touching the ground. Magic poured off her in cascades of violet light, and where she stepped, life exploded, flowers, blooming, fireflies dancing the very air, shimmering with power. Impossible, Garrick breathed, his tactical mind trying to process what his eyes were seeing. Moonborn were slaughtered in the Great Purge, 25 years ago. They're extinct. Mate Fenrir roared in his mind with such force that Garrick staggered, had to brace himself against the tree trunk. Madar's goddess sent her the mate bond. It slammed into Garrick like a freight train, the tether he thought he would never feel again, snapping into place with audible force, pulling tight between his soul and hers. Every cell in his body suddenly oriented toward the silver wolf, recognizing her, claiming her, demanding her. No, Garrick said through gritted teeth, fighting the instinct. The goddess abandoned me when she took Elena. This is a trick, a test, it has to be. But even as he denied it, his body betrayed him. His heart raced drumming against his ribs, his skin flushed with heat despite the cold night air. Every instinct screamed at him to go to her, to claim her, to protect her from a world that would destroy her if they knew what she was. A moonborn, the rarest bloodline, thought extinct, capable of controlling life itself, of healing mortal wounds, of making dead earth bloom, worth more than entire kingdoms, worth wars. He watched mesmerized as she chased the fireflies like a creature who had never known fear, who had never learned that beauty was dangerous. She looked innocent, free, everything he wasn't, everything he could never be again. Then the wind shifted. The breeze carried his scent, alpha dominance predator danger, straight into the glade. The silver wolf froze mid-leap. Her head snapped toward his hiding spot, those violet eyes locking onto the darkness where he crouched, pinpointing him with unnatural accuracy. Panic. He could smell it rolling off her in waves, acrid and sharp, the scent of prey that knows it's been found by something bigger, faster, deadlier. With a yelp of pure terror, she bolted. "Wait!" Garrick shouted, breaking from cover. He didn't think, he didn't plan, he just ran. He shifted mid-stride, Fenrir exploding from his skin with a roar that shook the trees and sent nightbirds screaming into the sky. The massive black wolf tore after the silver one, closing the distance with brutal efficiency, each stride covering twice what hers did. She was fast weaving through the dense undergrowth where he had to smash through her smaller size and advantage in the tight spaces. But he knew these woods. Every tree, every stone, every hidden trail. He had run this territory for 20 years. Marked it, claimed it, learned it. And he knew where she was running. Blackwater Ravine. She would be cornered. Garrick burst through the tree line and skidded to a halt at the edge of the gorge. 60 feet of empty air dropped away to jagged rocks in a river that roared with spring melt, the current strong enough to kill, cold enough to stop a heart. The silver wolf stood on the very edge of the precipice, looking down at the killing drop, then back at him. Her chest heaved. Her violet eyes were wide with fear, but also intelligence. Human intelligence trapped in wolf form. Garrick shifted to human form, standing naked at the opposite edge of the clearing, the predator and the prey separated by 20 feet of tension. He held up one hand in what he hoped was a calming gesture, though his heart was pounding. "Don't," he said. His voice came out rougher than he intended, layered with alpha authority he couldn't quite suppress. "Don't do it." She whimpered, a sound of pure distress that struck him like a physical blow, made his wolf howl with the need to comfort her. "Submit." The word was out before he could stop it, alpha command woven through every syllable like steel cable. It was the voice that brought enemy wolves to their knees, that forced obedience through sheer dominance, that had won him a dozen battles. "I am your alpha. Submit to me now." He watched her fight it, watched her legs shake as the command tried to force her down, tried to make her bare her throat in submission. A normal wolf would have collapsed immediately, unable to resist an alpha king's direct order. But she didn't submit. She held his gaze with those impossible violet eyes, and he saw something there that made his breath catch, made his tactical mind recalculate everything. Recognition. She knew him, had seen him before. Seen. And fear. Bone-deep, soul-crushing fear that came from experience, from having survived something terrible. She looked at him one last time, those intelligent eyes meeting his, making a choice between certain danger and possible death. "No," Garrick roared, lunging forward. "Don't you dare!" She jumped. He lunged for her, Fenrir lending him impossible speed, his fingers brushing the very tip of her silver tail first, sliding through his grasp. But she was already falling, her white form disappearing into the darkness of the gorge, swallowed by night and distance. The splash echoed up from far below, swallowed almost immediately by the roar of the rapids. Garrick stood at the edge, chest heaving, every muscle locked rigid. He scanned the churning water with enhanced vision, searching for any sign of silver, fur, any indication she had survived the fall and the killing current. Nothing. The water was too fast, too violent, the rocks too sharp. "No!" The word tore from his throat. half roar, half howl. It shook the birds from the trees, sent small animals fleeing in terror. He had found his mate, his second chance, his gift from a goddess he thought had forsaken him, and he had lost her in the span of 10 minutes. Fenrir was screaming in his mind, a sound of pure anguish that matched the devastation in Garrick's chest clawing at his insides. He stood there for long minutes, frozen between disbelief and grief, the tactical part of his mind warring with the emotional part. Then, because he was a soldier first, he began searching the area for clues for anything that might tell him who she was, where she came from. He found it snagged on a thorn bush near the ravine's edge, caught on the sharp barbs. A scrap of fabric, rough gray cotton. He pulled it free, holding it up to the moonlight. His eyes narrowed. He knew this fabric. He had seen it every day for 8 years without truly seeing it at all. Background noise in his fortress. Servant uniform. The lowest class, the invisible ones. Garrick's mind began working through the puzzle pieces with tactical precision. The scent he had caught in the grand hall earlier, wild lavender and ozone, so similar to what hung in the air at Moonblade. The quiet girl who scrubbed the floors, the one with her head always down, hair hiding her face. The one who never spoke. The one with gray eyes. Eyes that might have violet flecks if you look close enough. 3 years. She had been in his fortress for 3 years, invisible, silent, hiding in plain sight, while he walked past her hundreds of times without seeing. Sarah Thorne, Garrick said softly, testing the name he'd heard Mrs. Whitmore use once. The name felt right on his tongue, felt like truth. Fenrir stirred in his mind, still wild with grief, but beginning to calm. Found her, the wolf rumbled. Know her now. We'll find again. A slow, dark smile spread across Garrick's face. The tactical part of his brain, the part that had won wars and crushed rebellions, began to turn, began to plan. She was alive. She had to be. A moonborn could survive wounds that would kill normal wolves. The ancient magic in her blood would heal her knit broken bones, seal torn flesh. And if she survived, she would return to the only refuge she knew. She would return to the manor. And when she did, he would be waiting. Found you, Garrick whispered to the night, his voice carrying a promise. A threat, an inevitability. The Alphaking had found his queen. Now he just had to catch her. And he was very, very good at hunting. He shifted back to Fenrir and ran through the forest toward home, the scrap of gray fabric clenched between his jaws like a battle standard, like a claim. The game had changed, the chase had begun, and this time when he caught her, he would make sure she could never run again. The river spat Sarah out 4 miles downstream, her body battered and broken against rocks that should have killed her. She lay on the muddy bank, gasping, every breath a knife between her ribs. The silver-white wolf was gone, forced back beneath her skin by sheer exhaustion and pain. Human again. Naked. Bleeding. Barely alive. The moonborn healing was trying to work, knitting torn flesh and mending cracked bones with invisible thread, but it was agonizingly slow. 3 years of suppressant herbs had weakened her, made her vulnerable in ways her ancestors never were. She could feel her body fighting itself, the magic trying to heal the residual poison, trying to hold her down, keep her broken. Dawn was coming. Gray light filtered through the pine canopy, turning the world colorless and cold. She had maybe an hour before the manor woke, before her absence was noticed in the servant quarters. Sarah forced herself to move. Every muscle screamed protest, but she ignored it. She had learned to function through pain, to push past what the body said was impossible. Survival demanded it. He touched me, her mind whispered as she crawled forward through the mud. Just for a second, his fingers in my fur. The mate bond tried to snap into place. I felt it, that terrible, beautiful recognition. The tether reaching across the space between us, trying to lock, trying to claim. She couldn't let it complete. Ever. Because if the bond finished forming, he would know. He would feel her, always know where she was, sense her emotions like they were his own. There would be no hiding, no escape, no safety. And when he discovered what she truly was, not just a moonborn, but the last daughter of the bloodline that his predecessors had helped destroy, he would have to choose between his mate and his kingdom. Sarah knew which one he would choose. Kings always chose their kingdoms. She had learned that lesson when she watched her grandmother die, when she heard the War Council's justification for the Great Purge. Better to eliminate the threat now than let them grow too powerful to control. The trek back took everything she had. She moved like a wounded animal through the pre-dawn forest, following paths only she knew using techniques her grandmother had taught her during stolen moments of childhood. How to mask your trail, how to move through wolf territory unseen, how to survive when the world wants you dead. She reached the servants' entrance just as the first pink touched the eastern sky. The door was unlocked. She had made sure of that before she left, had wedged a small stone in the mechanism. Inside the manor was still quiet, most of the staff not yet awake. Sarah made it to her tiny shared room without being seen. Sarah and Marie were still sleeping, their breathing steady and deep. She grabbed the emergency dress she kept hidden beneath her thin mattress, and then detoured to the incinerator room. The torn gray uniform evidence of her midnight escape went into the flames. She watched it burn, making sure every thread turned to ash, erasing proof. Then the bathing room. Servants got cold water only, but she was grateful for it. The icy stream from the tap made her gasp as she scrubbed her skin raw, washing away the scent of river and forest, in magic replacing it with harsh lye soap in desperation. The bruises she couldn't hide, her entire left side was one massive contusion, purple and black, spreading from hip to shoulder like a grotesque painting. So she wrapped them tight with stolen bandages under her dress, layers of cloth to compress the injuries and hold her together. By 6 a.m. she was in the kitchen, her movements careful and controlled, every breath measured to hide the pain singing through her nerves. "Child, you look terrible," Mrs. Whitmore appeared beside her, keeping her voice low. The head housekeeper's eyes, sharp and knowing, took in Sarah's pallor, the way she held herself too carefully, the tremor in her hands. Sarah shook her head slightly. "I'm fine." The lie was obvious, written in every line of her body. Mrs. Whitmore leaned closer, her whisper barely audible beneath the clatter of morning preparations. "You went out last night. I knew you would. The blood moon." Her weathered hand gripped Sarah's arm, gentle but firm. "Did anyone see you?" The memory of ice-blue eyes locking onto her violet ones made Sarah's hands shake. She nodded once. "Yes." Mrs. Whitmore's face went pale. "Who?" The question was urgent, afraid. Before Sarah could answer, before she could sign or gesture or find some way to communicate the terrible truth, the kitchen went silent. That sudden, suffocating quiet that meant only one thing. The Alphaking had entered the building. Sarah's heart hammered so hard she thought her ribs might crack. She could feel him, that towering presence, drawing closer, making the air itself feel heavy with dominance. He never came to the kitchen. Never. This was servant territory beneath the notice of an Alphaking. But she could feel him approaching like an oncoming storm. "Everyone out." Garrick's voice rolled through the kitchen like thunder, each word a command that couldn't be ignored. Except the cleaning staff. The cooks fled like rabbits before a wolf scrambling for exits. Within seconds, only 6 maids remained, Sarah among them. They lined up against the steel counters, heads bowed, trembling like leaves in wind. Sarah kept her eyes on the floor, on his black boots that had appeared in her line of vision. Don't look up. Don't breathe. Be invisible. Be nothing. Be the ghost. But her wolf was awake now, no longer fully suppressed by herbs and desperation, and her wolf recognized him. Maid heard a wolf whined, confused by the fear. "Ours, why are we afraid?" "Because he'll kill us," Sarah thought back, "as soon as he knows what we are." She could track his movement by sound alone. The deliberate footsteps, the soft inhale, as he scented each servant in turn. He was hunting, methodical and patient, working his way down the line with tactical precision. He stopped in front of Sarah, the blonde Omega, who had always been kind to Sarah. Sniffed the air near her. Moved on. He stopped in front of Mrs. Whitmore, who looked like she might faint. He ignored her. Then he was there, standing directly in front of Sarah, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his imposing frame, could smell ozone and earth in wild male. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Every instinct screamed, "Run!" But there was nowhere to go, no escape possible. "Look at me." The command was soft, but it carried the weight of absolute authority, the voice of a king who expected obedience. Sarah had no choice. She forced her chin up, made herself meet those ice-blue eyes that had haunted her dreams and nightmares for 3 years. Up close, he was devastating, hard and beautiful and terrifying at all sharp angles, and controlled violence wrapped in human skin. A predator barely contained. She saw recognition flash in his eyes. He was remembering the silver wolf, comparing features, connecting pieces of the puzzle. "What is your name?" His voice was quieter now, almost gentle. Somehow that made it worse, more dangerous. Sarah opened her mouth. No sound came out. Her throat closed, locked by the selective mutism that had protected her for 3 years, the psychological cage she had built to keep herself safe. She couldn't speak, couldn't defend herself, could only stare up at him with mounting terror in her eyes. "She doesn't speak, Alpha." Mrs. Whitmore's voice trembled, but she forced the words out. "Her name is Sarah Thorne. She's been here 3 years. She's damaged, mute. We think something terrible happened to her before she arrived." 3 years. Garrick repeated the words, slowly tasting them like wine. His eyes never left Sarah's face, cataloging every detail. "And I've never noticed you." It wasn't a question, but Sarah heard the weight behind it. 3 years of invisibility, of careful hiding, shattered in a single night. "Where did you go last night and after your shift ended?" Sarah's hands moved in simple sign language, the only communication she had left. "To bed." It was all she dared say, the simplest lie. Garrick's head tilted slightly, watching her hands. He didn't understand. ASL had never needed to learn it, but Mrs. Whitmore did. "She says she went to bed, Alpha. She was tired." Tired. The word fell flat, disbelieving. Garrick reached into his pocket and pulled out something that made Sarah's blood turn to ice. Gray fabric. The scrap from her uniform, torn and muddy, stained with river water. He held it up to Sarah's shoulder, comparing. Perfect match down to the weave pattern and faded color. "Strange," Garrick said, his voice dropping to a dangerous purr that made her wolf whimper. "Because my guards found mud on the servant's entrance handle this morning. River mud still wet. And I found this," he lifted the fabric, "near Blackwater Ravine, in the Forbidden Forest, where a very special wolf jumped off a cliff last night rather than submit to her king." Mrs. Whitmore gasped, the sound sharp in the silence. "My king, that's impossible. Sarah is Omega minus. She has no wolf. She can't even shift. She's human or near enough to it." Garrick studied Sarah's face with the intensity of a man solving a tactical problem, a general planning his next move. "Is that true, Sarah Thorne? Do you have no wolf?" She nodded, tears streaming silently down her face, cutting tracks through the kitchen grime. The lie tasted like ash, but it was necessary. It had to be believable. "Are you nothing, just a maid?" Another nod, more desperate this time. "I am nothing. Please believe it. Please let me go." Garrick reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement like a predator that doesn't want to spook its prey completely. Sarah watched his hand rise, powerless to stop it, powerless to run. He gripped her left shoulder, exactly where the worst bruising was, exactly where she had smashed against the rocks in her fall, where bone had cracked and flesh had torn. Pain detonated through her body like an explosion. White-hot agony that turned her vision into static and her world into fire. Every nerve caught flame. She felt her bones grinding together beneath his fingers, felt her barely healed flesh tearing under the pressure. A normal person would have screamed. A normal wolf would have growled, would have instinctively struck back at the source of pain. Sarah did neither. She went rigid, every muscle locked. Her jaw clenched so tight her teeth cracked under the pressure. She bit the inside of her cheek until blood filled her mouth, the copper taste mixing with tears. But she didn't pull away. She didn't make a sound. She forced herself to be a statue, the invisible girl, the broken thing that felt no pain because she was already shattered beyond repair. She met his eyes and showed him nothing, gave him nothing but silence and stillness. Garrick felt the heat of the injury beneath the fabric radiating through the cheap cotton, felt her trembling with suppressed agony, every micro movement speaking of torture endured. But he also felt her absolute stillness, the warrior's discipline that let her endure without reaction. That kind of control wasn't learned in a kitchen scrubbing floors. It was forged in survival, in situations where showing pain meant death, where weakness was fatal. He released her abruptly, and she swayed but didn't fall, somehow keeping her feet through sheer will. "Mrs. Whitmore," he turned away, his face unreadable, a mask of stone. "Yes, Alpha. Sarah Thorne is reassigned, effective immediately." The words fell like a death sentence. Sarah's legs nearly gave out. Reassigned could mean anything, sent to the breeding kennels where broken omegas were used, given to the guards for entertainment, exiled into the wilderness to die alone. Garrick paused at the kitchen door, glancing back over his shoulder. His smile was predatory dark, full of dangerous promise and certain knowledge. You are no longer a cleaning maid. You are my personal attendant. You will serve me directly. In the Alpha Wing. He let the words sink in, watching her face go even paler, watching understanding dawn in those gray eyes with their hidden violet flecks. Move your things. You start tonight at dinner. Then he was gone, leaving Sarah standing in the stunned silence of the kitchen. Her fate sealed her cage, upgraded but still locked. He wasn't executing her. He was playing with her, studying her, the predator who had found interesting prey and wanted to learn everything about it before the kill. The Alpha Wing existed in a different reality than the rest of the manor, where the servant quarters were damp stone and mildew, where cold seeped through walls and rats nested in corners. Here everything was rich wood and soft fabrics in the scent of power. Sarah had been given a room, an actual room with a real bed that didn't sag, a window that overlooked the forest and let in actual sunlight, and a door that locked from the inside. It was a gilded cage, beautiful and deadly. She stood at the window now, looking out at Black Pine Forest in the afternoon light, her mind racing through scenarios and escape plans. He knows. He doesn't have proof, but he knows. He's not executing me. He's hunting me. Slowly, methodically. A predator who had found interesting prey and wanted to savor the chase. The knock on her door made her jump, heart launching into her throat. She turned, expecting Garrick, expecting confrontation. Instead, a vision of elegant menace swept into the room without waiting for permission. Vivian Ashcroft. She was beautiful in the way of highborn wolves, tall and sleek with cascading blonde hair that caught the light like his spun gold ice green eyes that held all the warmth of a winter storm, and a figure that made men stupid and women jealous. She wore a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than Sarah would earn in 10 years, and she moved with the confidence of someone who had never been denied anything, who had never known fear or hunger. Well, well, Vivian's voice was honey poured over broken glass. Look what the cat dragged up from the gutters. She circled Sarah like a shark, scenting blood and water, taking in the servant's plain dress. The bruises Sarah couldn't fully hide the way she held herself small and defensive and ready to bolt. I heard Garrick picked up a new toy, a stray from the kitchens. Vivian stopped in front of Sarah close enough that Sarah could smell her expensive perfume roses and something underneath it, something rotten and spoiled. Tell me, little rat, what trick did you pull? Did you flash an ankle, bat those strange eyes? Sarah kept her gaze on the floor, hands clasped in front of her in the submissive posture she had perfected. She signed slowly. I follow orders, my lady. Oh, it doesn't talk. Vivian laughed, the sound sharp and cruel like breaking glass. Even better, a pet that can't sass back. Let me make something very clear, you pathetic creature. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a hiss that carried venom. Garrick is bored. He collects broken things, wounded birds, damaged wolves, pathetic creatures like you. He studies them, lavishes attention on them meant for a week or a month. Then he gets bored and discards them like trash. I've watched him do it for 8 years. Vivian's hands shot out, gripping Sarah's chin with manicured nails that dug into flesh, forcing eye contact. I am going to be Luna. I have worked for 8 years to position myself to prove my worth, to wait out his mourning period for that dead bitch Elena. If you think you can bat your weird gray eyes and change that reality, I will personally skin you and use your pelt as a rug in my future bedroom. She released Sarah with a shove hard enough to make her stumble. Sarah caught herself on the dresser but didn't fall. Tonight there's a dinner with dignitaries from the Southern Territories. Alpha Merrick and his entourage. Important wolves. You will serve wine like the servant you are. And if you embarrass the Alpha King, if you spill so much as a single drop, I'll have you thrown into the dungeons where the guards can teach you your proper place. Vivian checked Sarah's shoulder, the injured one, with deliberate force as she swept past her shoulder, slamming into Sarah's with calculated violence. The impact sent shockwaves of pain through Sarah's entire body, made her vision white out. She gasped, clutching the wall to keep from collapsing, sweat breaking out across her forehead. When she looked up, Vivian was gone, but her words lingered like poison in the air, like a promise of violence. The formal dining room was magnificent in a way that spoke of old money and older power. 50 feet of polished mahogany tables set for 12 crystal chandelier, throwing rainbow light across white linens that had been imported from France, silver cutlery, arranged with military precision. The room smelled of roasted meat, expensive wine, and testosterone, the scent of powerful males gathering. Sarah moved like a shadow along the edges, wearing a new uniform black dress with white lace, higher quality than anything she'd worn before but tighter. It emphasized curves she usually tried to hide, made her visible in ways that felt dangerous, that made her skin crawl. Her job was simple: pour the wine, keep the glasses full, be invisible while being seen. But she could feel Garrick's attention on her like a physical weight, like pressure against her skin. He sat at the head of the table in full formal attire, black suit that emphasized his imposing frame. His dark hair pulled back every inch the Alphaking. He looked like violence wrapped in civility, like a weapon disguised as a man. Beside him in the seat that should have been reserved for a Luna sat Vivian Ashcroft. She had her hand on his arm, possessive and confident, laughing at something Alpha Merrick had said, with practiced charm. Declan and Cole flanked Garrick's other side, both men relaxed but alert, hands never far from concealed weapons. Old habits from their military days, instincts honed in combat. The visiting wolves from the southern territories filled the remaining seats. Alpha Merrick, himself a loud man with a booming laugh and scarred hands that spoke of violence, along with his beta and various officials. Sarah lifted the heavy crystal decanter, the weight making her injured arm tremble, despite her best efforts. She forced it steady through pure will. Don't spill, don't draw attention, don't give Vivian an excuse. She moved around the table, filling glasses with practiced efficiency, making herself as invisible as possible while performing visible tasks. She reached Garrick's glass. The conversation around the table had lulled, and in that moment of quiet, she poured the blood-red wine with careful precision. So Garrick, Alpha Merrick's voice was too loud, roughened by decades of whiskey and cigars and shouting orders. Rumor has it there was a disturbance in your territory last night. My scouts heard a howl coming from your forest. Said it sounded different, strange, not like any wolf they'd heard before. Garrick didn't look at Merrick. His winter-cold stare was fixed on Sarah's hand as she poured, watching the way her wrist shook with effort, noting every sign of injury with tactical precision. Just a rogue, Garrick said dismissively, his voice flat. It's been handled. A rogue. Vivian laughed, touching his arm with studied casualness, playing the role of supportive mate. Probably some diseased thing from the Northern Territories. You killed it, didn't you, darling? It got away. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Every wolf went still, conversation dying. Alpha Merrick raised an eyebrow, surprise and calculation in his expression. Got away from the great Garrick Hale. Merrick grinned, showing teeth in what might have been humor or challenge. You must be losing your touch, old friend. Age catching up with you. The insult hung in the air like smoke. Declan and Cole stopped eating, hands moving fractionally closer to weapons concealed under jackets. Insulting an Alphaking in his own territory was a death wish, grounds for immediate challenge. But Garrick smiled. It was slow and dangerous, the smile of a predator who had just spotted weakness in prey, who knew exactly how the kill would go. The prey was unique, he said softly, his eyes flicking up to Sarah's face for just a fraction of a second, just long enough for her to see the recognition there. I decided to let the chase last a little longer. Sometimes patience makes the capture so much more satisfying. Sarah's hand spasmed, just slightly, just enough. A single drop of wine splashed onto the white tablecloth. One perfect red circle, like blood on snow, like a target. The silence was deafening. You clumsy idiot! Vivian shrieked, exploding from her chair with theatrical rage. The chair scraped loudly against the floor, the sound harsh in the quiet. Look what you've done. That tablecloth represents the purity of this household. It was a tiny stain, barely visible, smaller than a coin, but Vivian seized the moment like a weapon, like an opportunity she'd been waiting for. She grabbed a heavy linen napkin and threw it at Sarah's face with force. Clean it up, or better yet, get out. You don't belong here. Sarah flinched, stepping back, the decanter clutched to her chest protectively. I'm sorry, her eyes said. I'm so sorry. She's useless, Garrick. Vivian's voice rose shrill with manufactured outrage that was too practiced to be genuine. Why do you keep this trash around? She smells like bleach and fear. She can't even perform the simplest task without ruining everything. Let me dismiss her properly. Vivian raised her hand as if to strike Sarah across the face, her arm drawing back for the blow. Enough! The word wasn't shouted. Garrick barely raised his voice above conversational level. But it cut through the chaos like a blade through silk, carrying alpha authority that made every wolf in the room freeze mid-breath, made the air itself feel heavy. Vivian's hands stopped in midair, her body locked by the command. Garrick stood slowly unfolding to his full intimidating height, the movement deliberate and controlled. He ignored Vivian, completely turning his body to face Sarah, the predator giving his full attention to prey. Come here, he commanded softly. Sarah stepped forward on shaking legs, the decanter still clutched in her hands. She expected anger, expected to be fired or worse, expected violence to finally fall. Garrick reached out and took her hand, the one that had held the decanter, the one that was trembling with exhaustion, pain, and fear. His fingers were rough, warm, impossibly gentle for hands that could crush stone. He turned her palm up, examining it in the candlelight, with the focus of a scientist studying a specimen. She could see him taking in the details. Old calluses from scrubbing floors, scars from kitchen accidents, the way her hand shook not from fear, but from injury barely healed. You are hurt, he stated. Not a question. A fact observed and noted. It is nothing, my king, she wanted to say, but no sound came out. She shook her head instead, the only communication she had left. You are shaking. His thumb traced the center of her palm, the touch sending electricity up her arm, making her wolf whimper with confused longing. He lifted her hand higher, bringing it close to his face. Inhaled deeply, scenting her the way wolves do, searching for truth beneath the layers of soap and suppression and fear. Sarah's heart stopped. The herbs. She'd taken triple the normal dose this morning, enough to make her nauseous, but stress burned through them fast. Could he smell it? Could he smell the wild lavender and ozone, the scent of storm and magic that was her true nature? Garrick's eyes narrowed. He smelled the cleaning chemicals, the cheap soap, the sweat of fear. But underneath, so faint it was almost imperceptible, there was something else, something familiar. The same scent that had haunted him in the forest, that had woken his wolf after 8 years of silence, that called to something primal in his blood. He looked at Vivian, who stood frozen by Alpha command, her face red with humiliation and rage. Sit down, Vivian. But Garrick, I said sit. The Alpha voice slammed into her like a physical force, like a hand on her chest, shoving her down. Vivian's legs buckled against her will, dropping her into her chair with an undignified thump. She looked furious and shocked, her carefully constructed image cracking like cheap porcelain. Garrick looked back at Sarah, still holding her hand, his grip gentle but inescapable. You will not serve the rest of the meal, he said, his voice dropping so only she could hear, intimate and threatening in equal measure. Declan, get a replacement server. Yes, Alpha. Declan was already moving professional and efficient. Garrick leaned closer, his words a whisper that brushed against her ear, making her shiver. Go to my study. Wait for me there. Do not leave. If you are not there when I finish this meal, I will tear this fortress apart stone by stone to find you. Do you understand? Sarah nodded mutely, her breath shallow. She pulled her hand away, the skin tingling where he had touched her, burning with the ghost of contact, and fled the room with as much dignity as she could muster. Behind her, she heard Alpha Merrick's nervous chuckle, protective over the hail that's new, unexpected. She is not help, Garrick's voice drifted through the closing door, dark and final and possessive. She is a puzzle, and I am going to solve her. Sarah ran through the corridors, but she knew with terrifying certainty that there was nowhere to run. The cage door had just locked, and the wolf who had caught her scent was patient, methodical, and absolutely relentless. The game was no longer about hiding, it was about survival. And Sarah was running out of moves, running out of time, running out of hope. Garrick's private study was a testament to controlled power, to a mind that valued strategy over sentiment. Unlike the grand library with its towering shelves and public displays of knowledge, this room was intimate and dangerous. Dark leather chairs, polished wood desk, covered in tactical maps, the scent of old whiskey and older secrets hanging in the air. Maps covered one wall, territories marked in red and black patrol routes, strategic positions, weak points in enemy defenses. The other walls held photographs from his military days, commendations from wars fought, and a single portrait of a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Elena, his first mate, dead 8 years but not forgotten. Sarah stood in the center of the Persian rug, feeling like a prisoner awaiting execution. She had been waiting for 90 minutes, each minute stretching into eternity, each tick of the grandfather clock in the corner like a countdown to something inevitable. She considered escape. The window was large enough to fit through, 3 stories down, but she could shift before impact if she had to run for the border, disappear into the wilderness and never look back, become a ghost again. But his scent was everywhere in this room. Dark earth, ozone, wild male, and it clouded her thinking, made rational planning difficult. Her wolf, no longer fully suppressed by herbs and desperation, whined with confused longing. Mate, the wolf insisted. Safe. Ours, he'll kill us, Sarah thought back. When he knows what we are. The door opened. Sarah spun around her heart, launching into her throat. Garrick entered, and he had shed the formal armor of the dinner like a snake shedding skin. Jacket gone, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing corded forearms tie loosened around his throat. He looked less like a king and more like a soldier who had just survived a battle, tired, dangerous, done with pretense and politics. He walked past her without a word, went to the crystal decanter on the side table, and poured himself 2 fingers of scotch. The sound of liquid hitting glass was deafening in the silence, each glug marking time. Vivian is furious. He took a sip, his back still, to Sarah's shoulders tense. She thinks I'm sleeping with you. Sarah's hands clenched at her sides. She said nothing. Could say nothing. The words locked behind 3 years of silence. Garrick turned, leaning against the table, studying her with those winter-cold eyes that saw too much. She's wrong, of course. I don't sleep with servants. He took another sip, slow and deliberate. And I certainly don't sleep with liars. The word hit like a slap, like accusation and judgment combined. Sarah kept her eyes on his boots, black leather, military grade, scuffed from years of use and violence. Look at me. The command was softer than before, but no less absolute, no less impossible to resist. Sarah forced her chin up, made herself meet his gaze, those ice-blue eyes that could freeze blood. Those eyes bored into hers, searching, dissecting, seeing past every wall she'd built. Let's review what I know. Garrick set the glass down with deliberate care, the crystal making a small clink against wood. A maid with no scent, no past, no voice appears on my border 3 years ago. Half dead from exposure and injuries. Convenient amnesia about how she got there. She becomes invisible, Omega minus, valued at less than furniture. He pushed off from the table, moving toward her with predatory grace that made her want to run. Then 3 nights ago, a creature of legend appears in my forbidden forest. A silver wolf that radiates magic strong enough to heal dead earth, to make winter flowers bloom. A moonborn, a bloodline thought extinct after the Great Purge 25 years ago. Sarah's breath came faster, shallower. He was circling her now, close enough to touch, but not touching, building pressure like a storm gathering strength. I chased this impossible wolf to Blackwater Ravine. She jumped 60 feet onto Killing Rocks rather than submit to her alpha. His voice dropped, intimate and deadly in equal measure. The next morning, my invisible maid has injuries that perfectly match such a fall. She moves like every breath is agony, but she doesn't make a sound. That kind of pain tolerance isn't learned scrubbing floors, Sarah. It's forged in war, in survival, in situations where showing weakness means death. He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his imposing frame, could count the silver hairs at his temples. And now he reached out, taking her chin in his hand with surprising gentleness, forcing her to hold his gaze to see the certainty there. Now that stress has burned through whatever suppressants you've been taking, I can smell you. Underneath the bleach, in fear, you smell like starlight in wild lavender. You smell exactly like the wolf that haunts my dreams, that woke my wolf after 8 years of silence. His thumb traced her jawline, and despite everything, despite the danger, Sarah trembled. Not from fear, from something far more dangerous, far more complicated. Tell me the truth. His voice became layered with alpha command, the power that could force submission from any wolf, that could make disobedience physically painful. Who are you? What are you? The compulsion hit her like a tidal wave, like drowning in invisible force. Her inner wolf writhed, desperate to obey the alpha, desperate to submit and tell him everything, to bare her throat and her secrets equally. But the secret she carried was built on 25 years of her family's blood, on mass graves and burning villages, and children killed for the crime of their bloodline. If he knew, if anyone knew, she wouldn't just die. She would be used, bred, turned into a weapon until there was nothing left of her but magic and misery. I am nobody, she gasped, fighting the command with every ounce of will she possessed, every bit of strength her grandmother had taught her. Sweat beaded on her forehead, running down her temples. Her hands shook violently. Please, let me go. Drop the act. Garrick's control snapped like a frayed rope. He slammed his hand against the wall beside her head, the impact making her jump violently, making plaster crack. I know what you are. Shift, show me. I can't. The words tore from her throat, the first sounds she had made in 3 years, raw and broken and desperate. You won't. He was trying to shock her into compliance, to break through her defenses like a battering ram through a gate. His hand moved to her injured shoulder, not to hurt intentionally, but to force a reaction, to push her past her limits. But his tactical mind had miscalculated the severity. He gripped exactly where the rocks had shattered bone, where the healing was still fragile, where nerve damage made everything 1,000 times worse. Blinding pain detonated through her body like a bomb going off. White-hot agony that turned the world into static and fire and nothing else. It was too much. After days of holding everything in, of maintaining perfect control while broken inside her grip on her power, shattered like glass under pressure, Sarah threw her head back and screamed. But it wasn't a human scream. It was a guttural, harmonic cry that shattered every piece of glass in the room. The Scotch tumbler exploding, the window panes cracking in spiderweb patterns, the crystal picture frames fracturing. The sound held layers of frequency that shouldn't exist in a human throat, that spoke of something ancient and powerful. And then the explosion happened. A wave of pure violet energy erupted from Sarah's body like a detonating star, like a supernova contained in flesh. It slammed into Garrick with the force of a freight train, lifting his imposing frame like he weighed nothing and hurling him backward across the room. He crashed into the bookshelf with bone-jarring impact, sending leather-bound volumes tumbling down around him in a cascade of knowledge and dust. Sarah collapsed to her knees, gasping for air that wouldn't come. The glamour she had maintained for 3 years dissolved like smoke in wind. Her eyes ignited not just violet flecks and gray, but blazing amethyst flames that lit the entire room with eldritch light that cast shadows in impossible directions. The air around her crackled with visible electricity, purple lightning dancing across her skin like living things. The plants on the windowsill, decorative ferns that had been dying from neglect, suddenly grew 3 feet in seconds, vines snaking across the floor toward her, like they recognized their goddess, like they were reaching for home. The very air hummed with raw, ancient power that made reality feel thin. Garrick groaned, shaking his head to clear the ringing in his ears, the disorientation. He stood slowly, pieces of broken glass falling from his shoulders, a cut on his temple bleeding freely. But he ignored the blood, ignored the pain. He stared at the small woman kneeling on his rug, surrounded by a swirling aura of magic that made the air shimmer and warp, that made breathing feel like inhaling lightning. This wasn't just power. This was primal, divine. This was what his ancestors had feared enough to try to exterminate. A moonborn, Garrick whispered, his voice filled with awe rather than fear. The legends didn't do you justice. They said you could heal. They never said you could destroy. The old stories suddenly made sense, filling in gaps he hadn't known existed. The bloodline that could control life itself, that could heal mortal wounds, with a touch that could make forests bloom in winter and bring the dead back from the edge. But also the bloodline that could unmake, that could channel nature's fury, that could turn peaceful earth into killing ground. The bloodline that every kingdom had feared, that the old Alpha Council had decided to exterminate before they became too powerful to control, before they could tip the balance of power irreversibly. The Great Purge 25 years ago. Entire families slaughtered in coordinated strikes across 3 continents. Women, children, elders, it didn't matter. The wolves had hunted them down and killed them all, terrified of what they represented, of what they could become. Or so everyone believed. Sarah looked up at him, her glowing eyes filled with tears that streamed down her face like liquid light. They killed my family for this, she said, her voice hoarse from years of disuse, each word clearly painful. My grandmother, my aunts, my cousins. I watched them burn our village. I heard them scream as they died. The words poured out now, 3 years of silence breaking like a dam finally rupturing under too much pressure. My mother was taken when I was born. I never knew her. My grandmother raised me in hiding, taught me to suppress my power, to be nothing, to hide my light. And then they found us anyway. Her voice cracked, breaking on the memory. She died protecting me, bought me time to run with her life. I was 16. Tears streamed down her face, cutting tracks through the dust and grime glowing faintly violet. You have to let me leave, Garrick, please. If your council finds out what I am, they'll do to me what they did to my family. Or worse, they'll keep me alive and breed me like livestock until I produce enough Moonborn to build an army. They'll use me until there's nothing left but a broken shell. Garrick walked towards her, slow and deliberate, his tactical mind already working through implications and strategies. The predatory edge was gone, replaced by something more complex. Hunger, yes, but also fierce protectiveness, possessiveness, wonder at what he'd found. Leave. He dropped to his knees in front of her, ignoring the crackling energy that stung his skin like static electricity, like touching a live wire. You're not leaving, ever. He reached out and cupped her face in both hands, his thumb stroking away tears that glowed faintly in the darkness, his touch impossibly gentle for such a brutal man. You're the White Wolf. You're a Moonborn. And by the goddess herself, his eyes blazed with gold as his wolf surged forward, pressing against his control. You are my mate. Inside Garrick's mate, Ferrer was howling in triumph, in recognition, in desperate need. Found her ours. Claim her, protect her ours. Sarah's breath caught her glowing eyes going wide. But before she could finish, before she could argue or flee or deny what hung between them like inevitability, the silence of the night shattered into chaos. The alarm siren wailed to life, a high-pitched scream that meant only one thing that every wolf in the territory knew. The fortress walls had been breached. The manor was under attack. The romantic tension evaporated instantly, replaced by cold tactical reality, by the ingrained instincts of warriors. Garrick was on his feet in a microsecond, his entire demeanor shifting from mate to general, from lover to killer. Stay here, he commanded, his voice snapping into military mode, hard and unyielding. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. He was already moving, ripping his shirt off as he ran, not bothering with the door. By the time he hit the hallway, bones were cracking, fur erupting. The massive black wolf Fenrir burst from his skin in mid-stride, twice the size of a normal timber wolf, roaring a challenge that shook the foundations of the fortress, that made windows rattle in their frames. Sarah scrambled to her feet and ran to the broken window, ignoring the glass that cut her bare feet. 3 stories down, the courtyard had become a war zone, had transformed into organized chaos. Dozens of wolves were swarming over the walls, militaristic, organized, moving in coordinated attack patterns that spoke of training and discipline. Their fur was pale, icy gray, almost white, built for northern climates and harsh terrain. The Northern Ridge Pack, the most brutal warriors from the frozen territories of Canada, known for their savagery and tactical precision. Leading them was a wolf even bigger than the others, with a distinctive scar running across his left eye that was visible even from 3 stories up. Alpha Ronan Blackthorn. She had heard stories about him in the servant quarters, whispered over dishes and laundry, a savage leader who ruled through fear, who had tried for years to form an alliance with Sterling territory and been refused every time, who didn't take rejection well. Now he was taking what he wanted by forced consequences, be damned. Sarah watched Ronan's wolf tear through Garrick's guards like they were made of paper, like they were training dummies rather than hardened warriors. He was fast, vicious, fighting with the brutal efficiency of someone who had been bred for war, who had never known defeat. Then she saw Garrick. His black form was a blur of violence in the center of the chaos, taking down 3 northern wolves at once with coordinated strikes that spoke of years of combat experience. He fought with the fury of a demon, all teeth and claws, and devastating power channeled with surgical precision. But there were too many. Even he couldn't be everywhere at once. She watched, horrified, as Ronan blindsided Garrick from the left, tackling him to the blood-soaked stones with the full weight of his massive body. The two alphas rolled snapping jaws aimed at throats, fighting for dominance in the ancient way. Ronan was younger, faster, less burdened by old injuries. He got the upper hand, pinning Garrick to the courtyard, stones his massive jaws opening wide over Garrick's exposed throat. One bite, that's all it would take. One bite to sever the artery, to end the Alpha King, to decapitate the pack. No, the word fell from Sarah's lips. Quiet, certain, final. Something primal woke inside her, something that had been sleeping for 3 years of suppression and hiding. Not just the wolf, not just the magic. Something that lived in the deepest core of what she was, the legacy of the Moonborn, the ancient purpose that her grandmother had tried to explain, but she had never fully understood until this moment. We are not just healers, little light. We are the balance. Where there is death, we bring life. Where there is darkness, we are the light. We protect what matters at any cost. That is our true purpose. Garrick mattered, her mate, her king, the only person in 3 years who had truly seen her, who had looked past the invisibility to the truth beneath. Sarah didn't use the stairs. She didn't think about the 3-story drop or the physics of it. She simply leaped from the broken window, trusting in instinct and ancient magic. She shifted mid-air bones, breaking and reforming with practiced speed, the transformation faster than it had ever been. The silver-white wolf burst from her skin, small but incandescent, glowing like a fallen star made flesh. She hit the courtyard pavement, not with a thud, but with an explosion of pure light, a detonation of concentrated magic. A shockwave of violet energy rippled outward from the impact point, knocking friend and foe alike backward, clearing a circle of space around her. The battlefield froze. Every wolf, sterling and northern alike, stopped mid-strike and stared, their animal brains overwhelmed by the impossible sight. She was magnificent. Her silver-white coat caught the moonlight and threw it back 100-fold, making her appear almost translucent, ethereal, like something not quite real. Her violet eyes burned like stars, and magic poured off her, invisible cascades that made the air itself glow, that made breathing feel like inhaling lightning. Ronan, distracted by the sudden supernova in his peripheral vision, looked up from his pin on Garrick. His eyes went wide with shock and greed, with recognition of what she represented. That split second of distraction was all Garrick needed. He threw the Northern Alpha off him with a roar that shook the walls, scrambling to his feet with predatory grace. And suddenly the silver wolf was there, standing beside him, her much smaller form radiating enough power to make the earth tremble beneath their paws. Garrick's voice filled her mind, the mate bond allowing mental communication, even though it wasn't fully formed, even though she had fought against its completion. "I told you to stay." His mental voice was furious and terrified in equal measure. "You were losing," she linked back, her mental voice clear as a bell, feminine and fierce, and unapologetic. Ronan shifted to human form, standing naked and covered in blood, his scarred face twisted with avarice and hunger. "The legends are true," he laughed, a wet, rasping sound that spoke of damaged lungs. "The White Death lives. No wonder you refused my alliance, Hale. You were hoarding the ultimate weapon, keeping her for yourself. Touch her and you die." Garrick growled, his wolf form radiating menace, darkness made manifest. "I don't want to just touch her." Ronan's smile was grotesque, showing too many teeth. "I want to breed her. Imagine the army we could create, pups with her healing magic and my combat prowess, my tactical mind. We'd be unstoppable. We could conquer the entire continent." Garrick roared and launched himself at Ronan with fury that transcended reason. The battle restarted with renewed savagery, with personal hatred added to territorial dispute. But this time everything was different. Sarah didn't fight with teeth and claws like the others, didn't rely on physical prowess. She danced through the battlefield like moonlight made flesh, like poetry written in violence. And where she moved, miracles happened. A sterling guard went down with his throat torn open, arterial blood spraying in an arc. Sarah brushed past him, her glowing fur making contact for just a second. The wound knitted closed instantly, flesh and muscle reforming, leaving only a scar. The guard gasped and lunged back into the fight with renewed vigor. A northern wolf lunged at her jaws, snapping for her vulnerable throat, going for the kill. Sarah's eyes flared brighter, and she released a pulse of blinding violet light that didn't harm, but stunned. The wolf yelped and stumbled, his nervous system temporarily scrambled, his coordination shot. He was still standing there, dazed and confused, when one of Declan's warriors finished him with brutal efficiency. She was a beacon of hope for the Sterling wolves and a weapon of mass destruction for the invaders. Everywhere she went, the tide of battle shifted momentum, changing like the turn of a great wheel. But she was focused on one thing, keeping Garrick alive. She tracked him across the chaos, staying close enough to intervene if needed, her eyes never leaving his black form. He and Ronan were locked in a death match near the central fountain, both alphas bleeding from dozens of wounds, both refusing to yield, fighting with the stubbornness of apex predators. Ronan was brutal and savage, but Garrick was tactical and experienced. He was wearing the Northern Alpha down, looking for the killing, waiting for the moment of weakness. Then Ronan's hand moved to his boot, a flash of silver in the moonlight. He had a dagger hidden there, illegal in wolf combat, against every rule of honorable challenge. But Ronan had never cared about honor. The blade was silver, poisonous to shifters, and from the black coating on the edge, it was laced with something worse, something that made Sarah's nose burn even from 20 feet away. Wolfsbane, concentrated, lethal even in small doses. Ronan lunged with the blade, the dagger aimed straight for Garrick's heart for the killing blow. Garrick saw it too late. He was mid-strike, overextended, unable to dodge, without leaving himself open to an even worse attack. Sarah saw it from 20 feet away. She saw the trajectory, calculated the impact point, with preternatural clarity, knew with absolute certainty that in 2 seconds her mate would be dead, her purpose would be void. She moved faster than thought, faster than physics should allow. Without tearing muscle, the moonborn magic propelling her forward in a burst of impossible speed, reality bending around her. The silver blade didn't hit Garrick's heart. It plunged deep into the white wolf's shoulder as she threw herself between them, as she made the choice that defined everything. The pain was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced, worse than the transformation, worse than the river, worse than 3 years of suppression. Silver burned through shifter flesh like acid, like liquid fire, and the wolfsbane multiplied the agony 1,000-fold, 100,000-fold. She felt the poison spreading from the wound, black tendrils racing through her bloodstream toward her heart like a killing flood. She collapsed, her brilliant light flickering like a dying star, like a sun-going supernova in reverse. Her wolf form couldn't maintain cohesion. She shifted back to human, involuntarily naked and broken on the blood-soaked stones, the silver dagger still embedded in her shoulder, black veins spreading from the wound like cracks in porcelain. A scream tore through Garrick's mind, Sarah's mental voice deafening in its agony, like having his skull split open. Then it cut off abruptly as she lost consciousness, as her mind went dark. Something inside Garrick broke. Something fundamental that had been holding him together, holding him back. He didn't just roar. He unleashed a sound that came from the deepest pit of his soul, rage and grief and devastation all condensed into one reality-shattering cry. It was the sound of a male who had lost his mate once and refused to lose her again, who would burn the world rather than experience that pain a second time. What he did to Ronan Blackthorn horrified even his own warriors, even Declan and Cole, who had fought beside him in the worst battles. He didn't just kill the Northern Alpha, he obliterated him, tore him apart with such savage brutality that there wasn't enough left to identify, that turned a living being into scattered remains and regret. The violence was primal, personal, absolute. It was the violence of a force of nature, of something that had transcended beyond mere anger into pure devastation. The remaining northern wolves, seeing their leader reduced to scattered remains and faced with an alpha king who had transcended into pure devastation incarnate, broke formation and fled into the night, running for the border, for safety, for anywhere but here. The battle was over. Silence fell over the courtyard, broken only by the groans of the wounded and the ragged breathing of survivors, the sound of warriors trying to process what they'd witnessed. Garrick shifted to human form, naked and covered in blood that wasn't his, that belonged to his enemies. He fell to his knees beside Sarah's broken body, hands hovering over her, afraid to touch, afraid to make it worse. She was so pale she looked carved from marble, her lips blue, her chest barely rising. The silver dagger jutted from her shoulder, and black veins were spreading from the wound like cracks in glass, racing toward her heart with visible speed. No, 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 no. Garrick's hands hovered over her, shaking. Sarah, Sarah, stay with me. Her eyes fluttered open just barely, The brilliant violet had faded to dull gray, the light dying. Ulda, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You're a moonborn, Garrick said desperately, tears cutting tracks through the gore on his face, his tactical mind grasping for solutions. You can heal anything. Heal yourself, do it. Can't. Her voice was fading, each word an effort. Silver, wolfsbane, too deep, too strong, can't. Fight it! Declan! Garrick roared, his voice breaking. Get the healers now! But even as he shouted, he knew. He could see it in her eyes, could feel it through the incomplete bond. She was dying. His mate, the miracle he thought he'd never have, was slipping away in his arms. The Royal Infirmary smelled of antiseptic and failure of medicine that couldn't cure what magic had broken. Every healer in the Sterling pack was crowded around the bed where Sarah lay, but Garrick could see the hopelessness in their faces, could read defeat in their body language. The head healer, Oren, a grizzled wolf who had served 3 generations of alphas, who had seen everything, looked up with defeat in his ancient eyes. She's fading, Alpha. The poison has reached her heart. We've tried transfusions, tried magical extraction, tried everything in our arsenal. She's rejecting all of it. Her ancient magic is too different. Our modern methods are incompatible, like trying to mix oil and water. He paused, throat working with emotion. She has minutes, maybe less. I'm sorry. No, Garrick stood beside the bed, one hand gripping Sarah's cold fingers, feeling her pulse getting weaker. She looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, hooked to machines that beeped increasingly slowly, each beat marking time running out. The black veins had spread across her chest, up her neck, creeping toward her face like a death mask being painted in real time. There has to be something, he said, his voice hard. Magic, medicine, ancient rituals, something. I didn't survive 8 years alone to lose her now. Alpha, Oren's voice was gentle, pitying. I'm sorry. We've done everything we can. Sometimes even our best isn't enough. Garrick looked down at Sarah, at the woman who had scrubbed his floors for 3 years without him seeing her, without him recognizing what was right in front of him. At the wolf who had jumped off a cliff rather than submit, who had valued freedom over safety. At his mate who had taken a killing blow meant for him without hesitation, without thought for her own survival. Then he remembered. Something old. Something forbidden. A ritual from the ancient times before modern pack structures, before politics and councils and rules. When wolves were wild and magic was everywhere and bonds were sacred above all else, above law and custom. Life force bonding, the ultimate joining, not just marking, not just mating, complete fusion of 2 souls sharing everything, strength, weakness, life itself. It was dangerous, irreversible, violating every modern protocol and safety measure. And it was her only chance. Everyone out, Garrick commanded, his voice brooking no argument. Alpha, she needs monitoring, Oren began. I said out. They fled, sensing that arguing with him now would be fatal, that the Alphaking was beyond reason. The door closed, leaving Garrick alone with his dying mate and a choice that would define everything. He sat on the edge of the bed, taking her hand in both of his, feeling how cold she was. Sarah, he whispered, leaning close to her ear. Can you hear me? Her eyelids fluttered. Garrick. Just a breath, barely a sound. I can save you. There's a way. But you have to understand what it means. He squeezed her hand, willing his strength into her, trying to anchor her to life through sheer force of will. I can bind us. Life force bonding. I'll share my alpha vitality with you. Let my power burn the poison out. But once it's done, there's no going back. You'll be mine and I'll be yours forever, completely. You'll feel what I feel, be what I am. He paused, making sure she understood the magnitude, the permanence. You'll have no escape from me, Sarah. No running, no hiding. I will know you always feel, you always find you wherever you go. You'll be bound to me until death takes us both. Do you understand? It should have terrified her. A day ago it would have. But lying there cold and dying, feeling the poison eating her from the inside, Sarah realized something fundamental. She didn't want to escape him. She never had. She had been watching him for 3 years, learning him, caring about him, from the shadows falling for him without admitting it. And when she saw him in danger, she hadn't hesitated, hadn't even thought. She had simply acted because the idea of a world without him in it was unbearable, was worse than death. She opened her eyes, those dying gray eyes that had once been so bright. She looked at him, really looked, and saw not an Alpha King, but a man. A man who was terrified. A man who had lost everything once and was begging her not to make him lose again, who was offering everything he had to save her. "Save me," she whispered, her voice hoarse but clear. Garrick nodded once, sharp and decisive. He leaned down, moving her hospital gown aside to expose the juncture of her neck and shoulder opposite the shoulder where the dagger had struck the traditional marking spot, the place where a mate's claim was sealed in blood and power. "Forgive me," he murmured, though he wasn't sure what he was asking forgiveness for. He let his canines lengthen, those elongated wolf teeth designed for the killing bite. But this wouldn't be death. This would be life. His life poured into her, merged with hers. He sank his teeth into her flesh. It should have hurt, but it didn't. As his fangs pierced her skin, something fundamental changed in the fabric of reality. He didn't draw blood. He pushed power. He unlocked the deepest reserves of his alpha strength, the raw vitality that made him a king, that let him command armies and cow rivals, that had kept him alive through 100 battles and forced it through the bite into her body. Golden light exploded in the room, so bright it leaked under the door and made the healers in the hallways shield their eyes, so bright it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Sarah's back arched off the bed, her mouth opening in a silent scream. Fire rushed through her veins, molten gold chasing away the cold. His power was overwhelming, aggressive, dominant, masculine. It collided with the black poison of the silver and wolfsbane like two opposing armies meeting on a battlefield. And his power won. The alpha strength was too pure, too concentrated, too absolute. It burned the poison out of her blood like sunlight evaporating shadow, like fire consuming ice. The black veins receded, flowing backward from her heart to the wound until all the poison was concentrated at the entry point. Then even that dissolved the wound, knitting itself together with supernatural speed, flesh reforming, leaving only a silver scar. The heart monitor went from slow and weak to strong and steady, the beeping accelerating to normal rhythm. Her skin flushed with color pink, returning to pale cheeks. Her breathing deepened, became regular. Garrick pulled back, licking the drop of blood from his lips. On Sarah's neck, where his teeth had been, a mark was forming. A swirling tattoo of a black wolf in a silver moon, intricate and beautiful, glowing faintly with power before settling into permanent ink. The bonding mark, visible proof that she was claimed, protected his. Sarah's eyes snapped open. They weren't just violet anymore. They were violet rimmed with molten gold. His color merged with hers, proof that they were no longer two separate beings, but one soul and two bodies bound together by choice and magic. Garrick. His name on her lips was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. He collapsed his forehead, pressing against hers, his massive shoulders shaking with emotion he rarely allowed himself to feel. "I've got you," he whispered. "I've got you. You're not going anywhere." She lifted a trembling hand to touch his face, feeling the tears on his cheeks, the dampness that spoke of fear he'd never admit to. This brutal king, this warrior who terrified nations, was crying over her. "I never wanted to escape from you," she admitted, her voice hoarse but clear, each word carrying truth. "I was just afraid you'd choose your kingdom over me when you found out what I was, that you'd have to pick between duty and desire." "My kingdom is nothing without you," he said fiercely, his hands cupping her face. "Do you understand? You could burn it all down and I would help you light the match. You could destroy everything and I would help you rebuild it. Nothing matters but you." She smiled through tears. "That's probably not healthy." "I don't care." He kissed her, then hard and claiming and desperate, pouring everything he couldn't say into the contact. And Sarah kissed him back, tasting blood and tears, and forever tasting home and safety and belonging. He glanced at Elena's portrait on the wall, visible from the bed. For 8 years he hadn't been able to remove. It hadn't been able to let go. Now looking at those painted eyes, he felt peace. Not guilt. Not betrayal. Peace. "She would have liked you," Garrick said quietly, following Sarah's gaze to the portrait. Elena believed in second chances, in the goddess's plan, even when it hurt. He looked back at Sarah. "I thought losing her meant I was done, that I'd used my one chance at happiness. But maybe Maybe she was preparing me for you, teaching me what it meant to love so I'd be ready when you came. Sarah touched the bonding mark on her neck, tracing the pattern of wolf and moon. No more hiding. No more hiding, he agreed. You're going to shine, Sarah, and the world will see what I should have seen 3 years ago, a queen. 3 days later, the Grand Hall was packed with every high-ranking member of the Sterling Pack and representatives from allied territories. The rumors had spread like wildfire: the battle, the White Wolf, the mysterious Maid, the Alpha King's possessive fury, the bonding that defied protocol. Vivian Ashcroft stood near the throne, her face a mask of barely controlled rage, her carefully constructed plans crumbling. She had been spinning the narrative for days, trying to position herself as the voice of reason in chaos. "We must think clearly," she called out to the assembled wolves, her voice carrying practiced authority. "This girl, this thing brought the Northern Pack to our doorstep. Ronan himself said he came for her. She's a danger to us all, a magnet for violence. The Alpha King is compromised, bewitched by whatever spell she's cast." "Is that so?" the voice boomed from the top of the grand staircase, cutting through the murmuring crowd. Every head turned. The room went silent, tension crackling like electricity. Garrick descended the stairs in full ceremonial armor, black and silver, the ancient regalia of the Alpha Kings, a cape flowing behind him like shadow-made cloth. He looked every inch the warrior monarch, every inch the legend. But no one was looking at him. They were looking at the woman on his arm. Sarah was transformed beyond recognition. She wore a gown of midnight blue that shimmered like the night sky, silver thread woven through the fabric in patterns that caught the light and threw it back, transformed. Her honey-colored hair was braided with diamonds and silver chains that spoke of wealth and power. And she walked with her head held high, radiating calm authority that made wolves twice her size instinctively lower their eyes, that spoke of power, recognized if not understood. The bonding mark was visible on her neck, bold and unmistakable. His claim, his mate, his queen. They reached the bottom of the stairs. Garrick led her to the center of the hall, directly in front of Vivian, making this personal. "You speak of danger, Vivian," Garrick said, his voice cold enough to frost glass, hard enough to cut stone. "Yet while you hid in the safe room during the attack, while you cowered and waited for others to protect you, this woman took a blade meant for my heart. She nearly died, saving my life." Murmurs rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. Sarah could feel their eyes on her, assessing, judging, wondering, calculating. "She is a moonborn," Garrick announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, ensuring no one could claim ignorance. "The legends are true. The blessing of the moon goddess returned to us. The bloodline we thought extinct lives on in her." He turned to Sarah, taking both her hands, his eyes soft when he looked at her, showing a tenderness that shocked those who knew him as only brutal. "She is my mate," Garrick continued, his voice roughening with emotion he didn't try to hide. "She is your queen." Vivian gasped, stumbling backward like she'd been slapped. You marked a servant, a nobody." "I marked a warrior." Garrick's eyes went hard when he looked at Vivian, ice and judgment combined. "A queen, someone who would die to protect this pack, who proved her loyalty in blood. What have you ever sacrificed, Vivian? What have you ever given that cost you anything?" He turned to Declan, his voice carrying command. "Escort Lady Ashcroft to the border. She is no longer welcome in Sterling territory. She is banished, effective immediately." "You can't do this!" Vivian shrieked, as guards grabbed her arms, began pulling her toward the exit. "War is coming, Garrick. The Eastern Coalition, the Western Plains, they'll all come for her. Every pack on the continent will mobilize. They'll burn this kingdom to ash to get their hands on a moonborn. Let them come." Sarah spoke for the first time, her voice soft but resonant, in a way that made everyone listen, that carried power beyond volume. She stepped forward, away from Garrick's protective presence, facing the pack that had ignored her for 3 years, that had treated her as less than nothing. As she walked, vines of ivy spontaneously grew up, the stone pillars blooming with white roses in defiance of winter and seized in proof of power beyond question. "Let them come," she repeated, her eyes glowing faintly violet gold, the dual nature of her power visible. "I have spent my entire life hiding in darkness, running from what I am pretending to be nothing. I am done hiding. I am done running. I am done being afraid." Power hummed in her words, making the air sharper, making reality feel thin. "If they want war, we will give them a war they will never forget. I am not a weapon to be wielded by others. I am not a prize to be won or a tool to be used. I am the storm itself. She looked at Garrick and he smiled, dangerous, proud, feral, the smile of a predator who had found his perfect mate. He took the heavy obsidian crown from the velvet cushion. Declan held the crown that had rested on the heads of Alpha Kings for 500 years. But instead of placing it on his own head, he walked to Sarah and lowered it onto hers with reverence. The weight settled on her brow. The crown of the sterling queen worn for the first time in 8 years. Long live Queen Sarah. Declan's voice rang out powerful and certain. Long live the queen. The pack roared in unison, the sound shaking the ancient walls, rattling the chandelier, echoing through the mountain itself. Sarah stood there, crowned and claimed, no longer invisible, no longer running, no longer afraid. She had become what she was always meant to be, what 3 years of hiding had delayed but not prevented. At the border, Vivian Ashcroft climbed into a waiting car with diplomatic plates, her face twisted with rage. She pulled out a satellite phone, dialing a number she'd kept secret for years, a number that represented insurance and revenge. It's done, she said when the line connected, her voice cold and calculated. Garrick has his moonborn, just as your intelligence predicted. She's exactly what you said she'd be: powerful, naive, loyal. Perfect. A male voice answered, smooth and educated. Good. The Eastern Coalition will be very pleased with your report, Lady Ashcroft. You'll be rewarded for your patience and dedication. Vivian smiled, cold and cruel. Just make sure when you come for her, you destroy Garrick Hale first. Slowly. I want to watch him burn. I want him to know that I was the one who betrayed him. That can be arranged, the voice said. We'll be in touch. The line went dead. Out. Vivian looked back at the fortress one last time, her eyes filled with promised vengeance. Later that night, in the privacy of Garrick's, now their chambers, Sarah and Garrick stood on the highest balcony overlooking Black Pine Forest. The same forest where he had chased her, where she had jumped off a cliff, where everything had changed. Vivian was right about one thing, Garrick said quietly, his arms wrapped around Sarah's waist from behind, holding her like something precious. Now that they know what you are, every alpha from the Atlantic to the Pacific will mobilize. Some will want to control you. Some will want to kill you. Some will want to breed you. The peace is over. Sarah leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her spine, drawing strength from the bond between them. She looked down at her hand, watching violet gold sparks dance between her fingers, power responding to thought. I used to think being a moonborn meant I could only heal, she whispered, her voice carrying on the night wind. But my grandmother told me something before she died in those last moments. She said nature isn't just flowers and gentle rain. She turned in his arms, looking up at the mate who had seen her when she was invisible, who had chosen her when he could have chosen power over love. Nature is the wildfire that clears dead wood so new growth can come. Nature is the flood that reshapes the land. Nature is the wolf who protects her pack. Nature is balance, and sometimes balance requires destruction before creation. Her eyes blazed, brighter power rising. We will build a new world, Garrick. A world where moonborn don't have to hide. A world where power doesn't require slaughter. And God help anyone who tries to burn a forest. He kissed her fierce and claiming under the light of the full moon. The quiet maid was gone, burned away like morning mist. The Alpha Queen had risen, and she would not be gentle, but their story was far from over. Earlier that day, in the quiet aftermath of the coronation, Mrs. Whitmore had approached Sarah in the throne room. The elderly housekeeper's face was lined with emotion, with secrets held too long. My queen, she had said, her voice shaking. There's something you need to know about your mother, something I've kept from you, and I pray you'll forgive me. Sarah had felt her heart stop. My mother died when I was born. You told me. I told you what I believed for 16 years, Mrs. Whitmore interrupted gently. What your grandmother told everyone. But 2 years ago, I received a message from a defector, from someone who escaped the Eastern Coalition. She had pulled out an old photograph, creased and faded but unmistakable. A woman in a cell older than Sarah, remembered from the single childhood photo she'd seen but unmistakable. Her mother, alive. She was captured 19 years ago, Mrs. Whitmore explained, tears streaming down her weathered face. Right after you were born. The Eastern Coalition didn't kill her like they killed so many others. They kept her. They have a facility hidden in the mountains, a breeding program. Your mother in 19 other moonborn women forced to produce children they can raise as weapons, as tools. Where Sarah's voice had been deadly calm, the calm that comes before a storm. Eastern Coalition territory, 2,000 miles east in the Appalachian Range. They have an underground facility heavily guarded. I received this from a defector 2 years ago, but I didn't tell you because I knew you would do something reckless, something that would get you killed. Garrick had studied the maps with tactical precision, his military mind already calculating odds and strategies. It's a trap. They want you to come. They're using your mother as bait. Sarah had touched the map and her magic had flowed through it like water, finding cracks marking locations with silver light. These are old moonborn sites, places where our power was strongest, where the veil between magic and reality is thin. The magic is dormant sleeping, but I can wake it. I can use it. She had looked at Garrick, determination burning in her eyes like actual fire. I'm not waiting for them to come to us to pick the time and place. We strike first. We find my mother. We free those women. And we show the Eastern Coalition what happens when you cage the storm, when you try to weaponize nature itself. Now 2,000 miles away, and in this response paused, because Claude reached its max length for a message. Hit continued to nudge Claude along. Underground facility hidden beneath the Appalachian Mountains, another scene was unfolding in shadow and secrets. A woman stood in a war room carved from living stone, studying intelligence reports spread across a metal table. She was beautiful despite the scars that marked her face and arms, despite the hard years visible in every line. Her eyes were violet but threaded through with black veins that pulsed with corrupt power, with magic that had been twisted into something wrong. My daughter survived, she said, her voice cold as winter, empty of maternal warmth. How long before she comes for me? A subordinate in military uniform checked his reports. Our scouts estimate 2 to 3 weeks before they can mobilize an assault force, my lady. The Alphaking will want overwhelming numbers before attempting a rescue operation. The woman, Sarah's mother, smiled. It held no warmth, no recognition of motherhood or love, only calculated cruelty, only the satisfaction of plans coming together. Good. Perfect timing. Let her come. She thinks she's rescuing me. She doesn't realize. She walked to a window overlooking rows of cells, each holding a pregnant, moonborn woman in various stages of accelerated pregnancy, their bellies swollen with children forced into being. I'm not a prisoner. I'm the architect. I'm the one who designed this program, who perfected it. She touched one woman's swollen belly, magic forcing the child inside to grow faster, accelerating development beyond natural limits. 19 years I perfected the breeding protocol, turned suffering into science. One moonborn can heal wounds, 20 can resurrect armies, can bring back the dead, 50 can reshape continents, can make deserts bloom or forests wither. She looked at a photograph of Sarah taken from a surveillance feed during the coronation, her expression analytical rather than loving. Time to teach my daughter what our power truly is, not healing, not protection, not the gentle gifts grandmother taught her. Her eyes flashed pure black, the corruption complete, the humanity burned away. Domination, control, the power to make the world kneel, to reshape reality according to our will. That is our true birthright. On the wall behind her, photographs of dozens of young moonborn women stared out from their frames. Some were children, some were teenagers, all were prisoners. All were tools in a machine of someone else's making. Let her come, Sarah's mother whispered, her voice carrying promises of revelation and pain. I'll be waiting, and when she arrives, she'll learn the truth. She's not here to save me. She smiled, terrible and beautiful power and madness combined. She's here to join me, to take her place in the new world order we're building. And if she refuses to see reason, if she clings to grandmother's weak philosophy, she looked at the pregnant women, at the next generation being forced into existence through magic and suffering. I have 19 other daughters now, and more coming every month. I don't need her permission. I just need her bloodline, her genes. One way or another, she'll serve our purpose. The trap was set with precision. The war was coming with inevitability. And the greatest battle wouldn't be for territory or power or freedom. It would be for Sarah's soul, for her conception of what the moonborn were meant to be. And the fate of every moonborn who came after would depend on which philosophy won healing or domination, protection, or control life or power. The silent wolf had found her voice and roared her defiance. Now she would face the hardest test, not defeating an enemy, but saving a mother who might be beyond saving, who might have chosen darkness over light too long ago to return. The Alpha Queen stood on her balcony, crowned and claimed and prepared for war. Not the war she expected, but the war that would define everything. And the world would tremble at what was coming, at the storm that had been caged for 3 years and was finally terrifyingly free. The end of the beginning, the start of something that would reshape the balance of power across the continent. The first chapter of a legend that would be told for generations. The silent wolf of Black Pine Manor had become the voice that would not be silenced, and her story was just beginning.